It's Monday afternoon and you finally get that phone call. It's from the listing agent. What do they say? Hey, sorry, you didn't get the property, and you're frustrated. You now have to give your client a call and tell them, I'm sorry guys, we missed out on this one, but don't worry, we'll keep on looking. If you feel like that right now, well, this video is gonna help you so you don't have to feel that again. Look, I can't guarantee you, but we've got a 14-step plan on how to make sure that your clients at least have all of the options in order to have them make the strongest offer. Now, here's where it actually starts. It doesn't just start at the offer process. We complete what's called a buyer consultation right up at the start, and we let our clients know exactly what's happening in the market. You see, every time that a consumer is more educated, they actually feel more empowered to make that proper decision. What does that mean? Well, I'll personally sit down with the client, I'll open up my computer, we'll go right to the MLS and they can see the they can watch the chart to see over the last several years of the prices actually increasing. Now, why do I do that? Because I'm giving them the opportunity to question, is now a right time to buy a house? I'm giving them the opportunity to answer the questions when we're not in the heat of the moment, to come up with the solutions and to come up with a strategy on how to navigate those scenarios. Otherwise, you're gonna do what you've always done, you're gonna get what you've always gotten, and you're gonna still get out-scripted by the fears that the clients have. You see, here's the thing, is the client's not wrong. The client's just scared. They have fear associated with it, and they're reasonable fears. They're the fears that their brain should be asking them. It's to mitigate risk and loss. And it's questions like these. Am I buying at a time when the market's going to crash? Am I overpaying for a property? Am I actually making a right move? And a lot of times, if we can just get ahead of those questions, if we have an opportunity to answer them and we're giving them the data in order to see that we're not just trying to sell something here, we're not being salesy, we're actually being professionals here, people will respect you for it and they'll actually trust what you say when it's time to guide the ship in the process. Okay, so let me get into it for you. So the first thing is we're gonna establish a buyer consultation. And in that buyer consultation, you're gonna go over the market and you're also going to go over the entire purchase contract. And here's why. If you do not do that, the first time that they're seeing that purchase contract is either on a prior deal that they did with a prior agent and had a bad experience and that's why they're not working with them anymore, or they're gonna work with you for the first time up front here, you're gonna walk it through, you're gonna deal with it when on a crunch time. Hey guys, glad you like the property. Offers are due in 3 hours, best and final, right? And then you're pitching things to them like, I want you to pay $100,000 over the asking price. And they're thinking to themselves, oh my gosh, they're running to their friends and family and the friends and family are telling them about the real estate world 3 years ago. Let's not do that. Let's not set yourself up for failure with that. Okay, so I'm gonna break down a lot of the components of the actual purchase contract. Some of the terms that you see here are not gonna just be on the contract, they're gonna be off the contract. So it might get a little bit interesting here. Now, just so you know, you need to tell your customer a few things. Number one, I'm gonna give you all of the options that exist because I wouldn't want you to go into the office on Monday or Tuesday and tell a coworker, you know what, I just missed out on my dream house. And the coworker says, I was able to secure mine. And you ask that question, well, what did you do? And they say, well, you know what, we made part of our offer, part of our deposit non-refundable. And you say to yourself, well, I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't even know you could do that. And they say, oh yeah, absolutely. Well, we weren't preparing to do home inspections anyway, so what mattered to us if we left $5,000 on the table if we couldn't buy the house? We wanted to buy it anyways. And all of a sudden you say, well, I didn't even know that was an option. I want to give you all the options. You can walk your customer through this process. If you ever feel uncomfortable during this process, it's because I'm telling you the truth. And sometimes the truth makes us feel uncomfortable. And so if I ever make you feel uncomfortable in this process by telling you some of these things, you're not required to do any of it. I'm just going to give you the best strategies. Just know I'm telling you the truth. And you want a truthful agent, right? It's a really great dialogue starter that you can have with your client. And it's gonna allow them in their opportunity for the minds, for you to say, hey, are you open to that? Are you open to a few other options? And everyone loves options. So let's give them all the options, okay? So the first one we wanna talk about is the biggest that everyone says, and that's price. Now, price you can actually manage through a number of different ways. You know, people will use these things called escalation clauses. And if you're brand new, it simply means that the buyer is willing to pay X amount of dollars over the highest competing bona fide offer up to a net purchase price of X, whatever that is, right? So if you're putting an offer in for $500,000, you'll go up to $600,000. You're gonna say, I'm gonna beat every offer by a certain amount of money. That could be $1,000, it could be $1, it could be $20,000. So the strategy here, if you are using an escalation clause, is simply this. Ask yourself that if all terms were the same, every single offer was the same, it had the same closing date, the same kind of buyer, meaning situation with need for closing time frames, same loan product and everything else. If they were all the same and the only other term left was price, then okay, we can beat it out by $1,000. If, however, there are other terms involved, which there definitely are, then why are we only trying to beat that other offer by $1,000? If you had a cash offer for $500,000 and another financed offer for $501, are you going to take the $501? The logical, reasonable response is no, you're going to take the cash. Why? Because all the other terms weigh out that specific price. So my suggestion is this: beat it by an amount that sellers are going to look at that and say, you know what, that's significant enough for me to take that risk on the financing or that risk with the other terms that it would for me to choose the other offer. Ask yourself the question this every time you get into the situation. If I'm a seller, what do I want? I want to make sure that if I select this offer, that it's going to take me to my closing table. And why that's so important is because likely that seller is buying another property and it's just as hard for them to find a house as it has been for you and your clients. And so you want to provide them that security. It's not necessarily about out of greed. It's about out of need to make sure that that transaction is going to hold fast all the way into the end. That's why the cash offer that closes in 7 days with no other contingencies is so exciting and enticing. It's because I don't have to worry. And that's the solution here, is get into the seller's perspective and figure out what would make them worry the least amount. And there's always going to be that little bit of balance between risk and benefit, and that's what you need to understand. So in terms of price, here's what I do. I provide a full market analysis, and I also bring in where the market trends are going. So if I can prove based upon comps that the property should sell for $500,000, but the market appears to be improving by 1% per month, we'll say that likely buyers are going to bid $505 for the property. And you may in fact have a 60-day closing or 30-day closing, and it's going to be another 1 to 2% beyond that. So we may want to bid $510 or $515. Hopefully that gives a little bit of an understanding on how we guide through price. Always relate it back to the data. If you can relate it back to the data rather than based upon emotion, that emotion, yes, it makes people act. Logic makes people think. Emotion makes people act. In this regard, it's going to give them the confidence in order to make that decision that they're not making a bad move. Okay? The next thing that you can do is you can look at the deposits. Now the deposits, we ask ourselves all the time, why do we do these first deposits, second deposits, bring some money at the closing? Well, the strongest position of deposits is all of it up front. If you're putting 20% down, put all 20% up front. Why? Because otherwise you're saying to the seller essentially, well, I'm holding money back because I'm not all in. And showing that you're all in is putting it all up front. Now you may have other contingencies there that allow you to back out of the contract and get that back. Again, no contingencies, going all in really, truly, seriously means I want this property. Now again, your client may not feel comfortable in order to do that. They should seek some legal advice if they need to, but I'm giving you the ideas for how you can possibly structure your offer in a way that a seller finds most appealing. Now these deposits, don't make it out on a personal check. You might start with that just so they have proof of it. But the first check, make it out as a certified check. Why? It's going to clear the account quicker. It's going to allow the bank to file the processing even faster. It's not going to have that second deposit, which requires the bank many a times to require another round of bank statements, etc. It's going to provide that further confidence for the seller. Another thing that you can do is you can actually make part of the deposit non-refundable. Now, why would you do that? It's simply stating to the seller that, in the event that we back out of the contract, you're going to get to keep part of our deposits. And the verbiage simply goes this: buyer willing to make effective immediately upon offer acceptance a portion of the deposit, and you define however much that is, immediately non-refundable and subject only to forfeit in the event of a seller termination, right? So if the seller terminates the contract, then the buyer would receive it back. Okay, so that gives you a good idea for that. Work on the wording there with your attorney, obviously. Closings. Closing timeframes, people always say, well, we're going to close as quick as we can. Well, what if you're financed? Well, let me give you an idea for this. Some lenders in the country, they actually provide, if you have a finance deal, for a full pre-underwriting process. What that means is that the underwriters are able to review the file and just simply, subject to an appraisal, that loan is going to get mortgage commitment right away. That's very strong. Have your lenders actually reach out. We're going to go over that in the process. But on that closing, Some sellers, they don't want to close soon. In fact, right now, many sellers want to wait. Hey, can you wait and give us 3 months in order to close? I got to still find the house that I'm interested in. Well, let me give you a couple of solutions. You might want to close right away within 3 weeks or 30 days and allow the seller to continue to live there. Now, your loan product may or may not allow that for your client, but you may be allowed to sign a use and occupancy agreement, a hold harmless. You may even sign a leaseback agreement, but give them under market rent. We've seen deals before where we've closed on the home and it was a place where we were able to let the seller live there for a few months and allow them to find a house and everything else before we ask them to move. So that can be extremely attractive. Don't just ask them, hey, I'm gonna close quick. The stress for a quick closing might say, yeah, we wanna move quick, but we actually need more time in order to move out. So definitely consider that when you're making your offers. Appraisal is probably one of the largest concerns right now. Appraisal. What that means is, yes, not only can we order the appraisal quickly, you want to get that appraisal to the lender and don't wait to go through the home inspection process. In fact, wait for the lender to disclose the loan as soon as possible and order the appraisal as soon as you possibly can. In fact, some places around the country, lenders are even ordering the appraisal prior to receiving the contract, if you could believe it or not. Some of them have that ability. In this case, what we're going to suggest is that the most concerning thing a seller has is, well, my property I think is probably, I'm listing it for $500. It's probably worth $550 at best, but I'm receiving offers all the way up to $600. Well, how does that benefit me? Because if the buyer's appraiser comes through and determines that the property is only worth $550, I'm going to have to reduce my price all the way down to $550 unless the buyer brings up that gap, that disparity. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's the ability to bridge that gap and disparity in between the purchase price and the appraised value. And those buyers that are indicating on their contracts, whether needed or not, that they will simply back up this offer by saying, in the event of a disparity between appraisal price and purchase price, the buyer will bring the difference of or a difference of amount. So you can bring $5,000, $10,000, or any disparity to the table. Then those are the offers that sellers are not going to worry. You know what? They say they're going to bring $600, even if it appraises at $5, they're going to bring $100,000 worth of cash to the table on top of their down payment and closing costs. That is something that is very attractive to a seller because why? It has the least amount of risk that the deal could fall apart. Inspections are another item that are extremely important in this process. If you're going through the inspection process, that's simply because you want to know from the roof to the foundation and everything in between, including the septics, the wells, termites, radon, asbestos, mold, whatever else you can think of. You want someone to give a good look at it. Well, who wouldn't want to, right? Who wouldn't want that process? Whether I'm making an investment for myself on a development deal or I'm getting invested in a stock or anything, you want to have a due diligence period. Now, there's a few different strategies around this. The first is to simply offer and say, I'm going to do a full and complete inspection. And if that's what your clients want, you can certainly, obviously say, sure, we'll do that. We're just finding in this market that many sellers don't want to entertain those offers. Okay, so in the event that that's not the case, a next step in the more attractive direction is to say, well, we're going to do the home inspections. We're just going to say that we're not going to ask for any items in return, any repairs from the seller. We still retain our rights to back out of the contract. We call this as is, where is. Okay. In that instance, you're telling the seller we're still interested in doing some home inspections, but we've taken some risk off to the table that we're going to ask you for anything, but that risk still remains on the table that we could withdraw from the contract. Another thing that you could possibly do is completely forego the inspections altogether. In that regards, your buyer is not going to have an ability to have that due diligence period for themselves or able to back out. However, they're simply going to just have to go through that process knowing that things may show up in the back end. Some things that we've seen as well, as being successful is the ability to inspect in the property, but not the ability to terminate. So they're able to see what they're getting into, but they're not able to terminate. We've also seen the ability for people to do these almost, they're called like pre-offer home inspections. They're not actually home inspectors, but what's happening is you're bringing a qualified contractor through. Sometimes even a home inspection service may offer this. You're kind of doing a walk around or a walkthrough with the property. They're able to say, well, we saw that the shingles on the roof appear to be deteriorated. We can't get on the roof. It appears that certain elements in the property, like the chimney, may need a little bit of work, but again, we can't fully inspect it. It's giving that buyer that little bit, that edge of here's what you're probably going to get into in the next bit. So if you can accomplish one of those, you're going to find a lot of strength, especially if your buyer is not worrisome over the inspection process and alleviates the seller's fears that they're going to back out during that process. Now, another thing that's very important here in the offer process is sometimes homes are actually purchased off the market. What buyers don't understand is privacy can be a big thing, right? Privacy is huge. That might be, we don't want a for sale sign in the front lawn. We don't want, moving trucks out there. We don't want any of that. You can actually, we've seen it put into offers, hey, we're going to do this where the seller, they're going direct, buyer and seller, and sometimes a real estate agent facilitates there. And when they're facilitating, it's, hey, no social media posts. We won't let anybody. You'd be surprised as to how often people actually find that appealing. Commission is another thing. I'm not talking about just reducing your commission. If you need to do that in order to make a deal happen, people have opinions on it. My opinion is don't reduce the fee in order to make that just work for the consumer. Here's another way. If the consumer truly wants, if the buyer truly wants the property, they can actually pay for the seller's agent's commission without actually raising the purchase price, right? So if they have that cash on hand, instead of raising the purchase price, especially if we're in concern of, appraisals, we can say, the buyer willing to pay the seller agent's commission. It's obviously going to have to be disclosed over to the seller because that's just part of our code of ethics, but definitely that's another option that they have. FHA and VA contingencies, a lot of times we see this show up. Government-backed loans often have these, there's just a HUD handbook that outlines all of these conditions that appraisers are going to look for in a property. Why not, if it's possible, to have the buyer handle certain things, right? Like, if a termite treatment shows up or something like that and it's not a VA, we're going to pay for that. In the event that, there's some chipping paint here, we'll pay for that, painter to come in and paint the property. So these are items that will alleviate for the sellers a reason why not to accept an FHA, VA, USDA loan, and you can actually help your clients. And in some cases, those VA, those veterans who've really, they've served our country and laid, so much down and sacrificed that you can help them get that, especially when there's such a poor stigma out there about VA loans when they're one of the strongest loan products and borrowers out there. Some things as well that you can do is in the taxes situation or in any other adjustments, these kind of two tie together. Anytime that the seller would have to pay for certain items, you can actually prepay in advance, pay for other items on their future property. You can pay those items off or, say that, hey, for the adjustments that would happen for rent or whatever it is, security deposits need to be given back. We're not going to ask for any of those items. So those are a few other items. Items like moving costs, we've seen it before where it's, hey, we're going to pay for your movers to come in. We're going to pay that bill for your family to have dinner after the movers come through. Whatever it is, you can add that into the contract in order to just show that, hey, we're really excited about it. Lender communication cannot be underlooked. Many times our lenders are reaching out directly over to those sellers' agents saying, hey, listen, you did a great job marketing this property. Start with a smile, right? You did a wonderful job. And now we're looking to simply say that this buyer has been all the way through the underwriting process and just subject to an appraisal, this deal closes, right? And why is that nearly just as good as cash is because we're just only waiting on the appraisal. And oh, by the way, they said they'd pay for any disparity in between the purchase price and the appraisal. There's nothing to worry about here. You put this contract together and it's, one of the largest banks in the world backing this transaction, not someone who has $300,000 in their bank account or $500,000 in their bank account, and anything could happen to them, right? You actually have more security with the bank than you do with the individual, and so that's super important. Have them reach out and call. It's funny what seller agents will do. They'll answer the phone for a lender, but they might not answer the phone for another real estate agent because they're going to get the same questions. What are you looking for? Best price, no contingent? You're repeating the same script over and over, and it kind of gets annoying, right? But you'll take a call from a lender because you never know. It might be a referral or something else. It's a great way to provide connections. And those lenders sometimes can say like, hey, it sounds like you got a lot of offers on the table. And they start to brag, hey, we got 10 offers or we got 2 offers. Surprising, I was thinking there would be more. And it's interesting the sort of advantage that your borrower may have in that process if that information is freely offered. Emotional communication cannot be underlooked in this process. Now, across the country, these buyer love letters have been discouraged as fair housing says, well, it's not really fair for you to say, well, here's my beautiful family and I've got an American, flag behind me with the apple pie, and somehow a seller finds that as moving and all of a sudden they want to select that offer over another person's offer. Now, as nice as that is, in some places that's allowed, in other places it's not. that is an option, and so sometimes it's encouraging to have a seller write a letter over. Many seller agents these days will say, hey, we don't even want to deal with that. We just want to deal with the other terms of the contract. But something that we've seen across the country, it's actually been pretty funny, is we've seen buyers send buckets of flowers or anything like that over to the seller. They've even written letters and dropped them off in mailboxes or had friends of friends in order to reach out. It's interesting what you can see when all of a sudden there's a connection in between a buyer and a seller. And it may, in fact, impact the situation where why? They all of a sudden want to give this house that they have cared so well for over the years over to another family who's going to enjoy it just as well. Again, seek your local state laws and realtor governance committees in order to see if that's allowed in your area as well. Okay, agent-to-agent communication cannot be overlooked either. It's funny. We talk about, that doing deals with certain teams or doing deals with certain agents can go smoothly or not smoothly. It's common practice around the water cooler in an office to kind of overhear, and hopefully you don't participate, but oh my gosh, I'm dealing with this certain transaction with this realtor, and everyone rolls their eyes. Why? Because their process, their systems, and their operations are not really reflecting excellence, and it's kind of put together and sloppy and unorganized. It's amazing how far a good reputation will go in this business, and so it's really important if you're not on a real estate team or with a brokerage that's local that has a really good reputation. Why is that? Is because those should not affect the actual terms, the actual dollars, but this is one of those intangibles that the seller's agent is going to sit down with these sellers and advise them not just on the terms of inspections and price and deposits and everything else, but they're going to simply talk to that fundamental question that we talked about at the beginning, which is this going to get me from point A to point B in the best experience? Is it going to be smooth for me? Because it's just as hard for that seller to find a new house as it is for your buyer to find that property. And so what might they be saying? Well, I know that real estate agent. Every time I do a deal with that real estate agent, it's actually really difficult. They're slow on the deposit. They really don't have good lender communication. They don't guide their buyers all the time. Why? Because they maybe have done a transaction with them or two in the past. Maybe they've worked with their team or their office and they've had a wonderful transaction. And they may in fact say, well, I'll tell you what, these terms are really similar in these two deals. And I've just had nothing but great experiences with this group. And I haven't had really good experiences with this other one. We've been blessed and fortunate to have so many good recommendations from other real estate agents because of how we run with our systems and operation, training and support systems and our admin staff, that many realtors in the community just say, hey, listen, we want to do a deal with David's team and his team agents. And so that agent-to-agent communication could not be more important. And in fact, one of the best ways that you can start out that process, let's say you're not a part of a real estate team, is actually start out not just with an email or a phone call. If they're a seller agent in this market, they're probably getting 30 or 40 calls over a weekend in order to ask the same exact question. Start with a video text. Put a face to a name. Give that digital empathy over to the other side to let them know that, hey, listen, it's important for me as it is for you to have your seller have a wonderful experience in this process. I just want to put a face to the name and give you that strength that my lender's going to reach out as well and show how well qualified they are. My clients are coming in as extremely strong. And if there's anything at all that we can do in order to modify this offer to make it more appealing to your seller, then we're certainly willing to do so. Hopefully this video has been helpful for you and provided these 14 tips on how to better navigate the situations. If you have questions about certain clauses or navigating these difficult scenarios, we'd love to hear about them, so certainly reach out with that. If you have resources as well in the market with certain softwares or anything else that you can see how many showings are out there on certain properties, all of that can be useful along with these tips in order to structure an offer that's the most appealing to sellers in this market to win more offers for your clients and hopefully provide a better experience. We hope you enjoyed the video.